The Mesmerist's Apprentice by L.M. Jackson, read by Phyllida Nash. Prologue. The coffee house was a small establishment situated upon the corner of Liquorpond Street and Leather Lane. In fact, to be quite accurate, it was not so much on a corner as a kink in the road, for the streets of Saffron Hill had a tendency to intersect at unlikely inconvenient angles, and the northerly end of Leather Lane was no exception, terminating in a peculiar sloping piazza, plagued by loose cobbles, littered with cabbage leaves and herring-bones, the detritus of the market. The spot bore no particular name, being too asymmetrical and lopsided to be a square, and far too open to be a court, but the market crowds were predisposed to swirl and eddy around its precincts, until, trickling downhill along sundry obscure tributaries that meandered in the direction of the Middlesex House of Correction, or Smithfield. It was, therefore, however undistinguished, a good location for business, especially one savouring of mocha. The coffee house in question, Sarah Tanner's new dining and coffee rooms, was squeezed between the premises of H. Nichols, tobacconist, whose front was all but hidden by the coster's barrow that had a seemingly permanent claim on the pavement outside, and Brecknell's wax chandlers, whose window advertised "Botanic Transparent" at 10p per pound, and the sale of colza oil by gallon or pint. Unfortunately, neither Mr. Nichols nor Mrs. Brecknell, a robust widow of some 20 years' standing, had much time for their neighbour, not since the dramatic conflagration which had laid waste to the old dining and coffee rooms the previous year, and threatened to doom their respective stocks of weed and wax to premature ignition. True, no great harm had been done to their property, but there were gossips among the coster women who had claimed the accidental blaze was Mrs. Tanner's own doing, that she had come home dead drunk, and sent the fateful oil lamp flying in an awful fit. Sarah Tanner herself had said nothing to correct the rumour, and if her miraculous escape from the fire had only fuelled the impression, in certain corners of the market, that it was the luck of the devil with that woman, then the ensuing reconstruction of the dining and coffee rooms, within 3 months of its fiery destruction, only served to make matters worse. In fairness, it was hard to say precisely what the coster women objected to in the proprietress of the coffee shop. Despite the rumours, she had no great fondness for liquor. She was but rarely seen in the Bottle of Hay, the nearest public house, and not known to frequent any of the local beer shops. She was well-spoken, polite, and made herself agreeable to all her customers, from the most condescending of junior clerks to the humblest street hawker. She had a face which any self-respecting gentleman of the press would have dubbed interesting, and which lesser men of the coster fraternity called pretty as a picture. And if she kept her past something of a mystery, she was not alone in that, not in the vicinity of Leather Lane at least, not by a long chalk. Possibly it came down to petty jealousy, for she did have a fine figure. Indeed, since no one knew how Mrs. Tanner had come by her shop at such a young age, or revived it from the ashes with such speed, there was a good degree of speculation of the worst sort. And yet Mrs. Tanner was not entirely without friends in the market, if only because she did a good deal of trade in the way of comestibles, and paid her bills promptly. Furthermore, when the new dining and coffee rooms reopened, it did so with a full complement of former employees. Mrs. Hinchley, its redoubtable plain cook, Ralph Grundy, the old man who had served as its waiter, and a young General Skivvy by the name of Nora Smallwood, reputed to be the proprietress's cousin. There was a decent complement of customers, too, for few men in the vicinity of Leather Lane, whether costers or otherwise, put their wives' scruples above the demands of an empty stomach. Mrs. Hinchley's breakfast in particular enjoyed the enviable reputation of being a regular blowout at a knock-down price, and there was not a man in the market who would hear a word against it. At least, not until the trouble began.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?